Ukta! Ukta! Oh! Ukta! Oi!
With the dying breath of migration season, peace upon the ecosystem of Gondwa is slowly but certainly making its return. The small animals are out and about, with the bounty of resources that came with the fallout of giants making their way to the northern part of the artificial ecosystem. Unfortunately, a massive threat looms among them, for the small creatures are not the only ones enjoying the bountiful resources, for they themselves are resources in plenty. This creature in question is a massive predator, a beast that is rather titanic, about to awaken from his slumber. This is Tyrannotitan, a 38-foot-long, 6-ton bruiser with an insatiable appetite for meat. And after a very long nap, he is ready for some tasty snacks. In the real world, Tyrannotitan, Didelphodon, and Dinomasukis were never in the same ecosystem, since all three were separated by time and continents. In the case of Dinomasukis, it was found in the Jana region in the Santa Maria Formation of Brazil, with fossils dating back to the Triassic period, a time period long before Tyrannotitan or Didelphodon. In the case of the small marsupial Didelphodon, while it is in the same time period as Tyrannotitan, the thing is, Didelphodon fossils were found in the Hell Creek Formation of the Midwestern United States. And finally, in the case of our protagonist, the Tyrannotitan, while Tyrannotitan is in the Cretaceous period like Didelphodon, the difference being was that Tyrannotitan was in the early to mid-Cretaceous, with fossils being in Argentina, specifically in the Patagonia region. In the artificial ecosystem of Gondwa, where different creatures from different time periods and different places are all in the same ecosystem, anything could be possible in regards to who can hunt what. This specific individual of Tyrannotitan is known as Sundowner, in reference to the hit video game Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, mostly due to the fact that both one of the antagonists and the dinosaur have an insatiable lust for blood. Difference, however, between Sundowner, the dinosaur, and the antagonist in the video game is that whereas the antagonist in the video game lusts for war, conflict, and glory in the battlefield, Sundowner, the dinosaur specifically, is nothing more than an animal in search of his next meal. 3 days ago, after a great migration of massive herbivorous creatures, Sundowner was kicked out of the pack by his own parents. However, this was not because it was a cruel act from his parents. It was simply because Sundowner was 20 years of age at minimum. And on that end, his parents had reason to believe that it was time for him to move on without the family pack. It was time for him to no longer be a prince amongst the pack. It was time for him to find his own territory and become a king upon his said territory. And this time, he might be in luck. This is mostly because Sundowner's instincts telling him that there is definitely a kingdom awaiting his conquest to the southeast. Those instincts stem from the fact that his nose, while it's not the best compared to other theropod dinosaurs, it is still good enough for him to smell that there is a smorgasbord of prey awaiting him in said territory. What this means for Sundowner is that the easy part of finding his territory is over with. The hard part, however, is the part where he has to simply go over to the territory, see it for himself, and simply establish his territory in order for him to rule. Titans, like Sundowner, have a body shape kind of like a Tyrannosaurus's body, and feet kind of like a Dromaeosaurid's body. Titans are related to neither of those creatures, for they themselves are part of the order Carcharodontosauria. Carcharodontosaurs are the type of dinosaurs with razor-sharp serrated steak knife-like teeth that they use as a means of shearing the flesh off of would-be prey items. Other examples of the Carcharodontosauria faction include, but are not limited to, Carcharodontosaurus, the namesake of the dinosaur family known as Carcharodontosauridae, Giganotosaurus, the more famous cousin to Tyrannotitan and the most famous of the Carcharodontosauridae faction, Acrocanthosaurus, the early Cretaceous butcher of North America, and finally, Concavinator, the land shark of Spain. Sundowner's kind is known for taking on the more famous Patagotitan, a massive sauropod with a head as big as a 6-foot grown man's torso. However, his nose picks up the scent of a monster that his kind in real life is not used to dealing with. A beast with a stench far more foul than onions. Although Sundowner could theoretically take on the beast that is smellier than onions, he simply chooses not to, and instead chooses for a quick pit stop to drink some fresh water, before moving on to the destination that his instincts tell him to go. This is due to the fact that recent evidence suggests that Sundowner might be more intelligent than most like to believe. Recent well-educated guess suggests that theropod dinosaurs might have more brain power than expected, primarily due to the fact that theropod dinosaurs are the closest relatives to birds. In fact, birds are theropod dinosaurs. And we have seen countless cases of birds being the smartest of the theropod dinosaurs that we currently know of, as far as we, in the present and the real world, are aware of. By applying this, we can deduce that dinosaurs, specifically theropod dinosaurs, like Sundowner's kind, the Tyrannosaurids, the Dromaeosaurids, and many other types of theropod dinosaurs, are smart enough to analyze that some fights are not really worth it. And in Sundowner's case, the fight with the beast smellier than onions is not really worth it, especially when he has better things to do, like finding the destination his instincts tell him to go to. After all, why fight a beast that your species is possibly not familiar with, let alone you are not familiar with? One can simply go after a smaller animal that would rather flee from you than fight you. Like this tasty Centrocheles that crossed Sundowner's path. Although it hurt his teeth, the impact from his heavy attack has killed the tortoise. After a tasty cream puff of a snack from the Centrocheles, he moves on to his destination, hoping that it's filled with softer foods than tortoises, mostly because his teeth are built for shearing the flesh off of would-be prey items that are not armored, unlike the more famous creature Tyrannosaurus rex. His instincts tell him that he could be in luck once he gets to the destination, mostly because his nose picks up the scent of an abundance of soft foods. On that behalf, this motivates him to keep going until he has reached the destination. His current estimate of reaching said destination is by sundown, no pun intended. Suddenly, his nose picks up the scent of an animal with hides softer than the Centrocheles. He'll have to play his cards right if he is to get the tasty snack. In the real world, Wadiosaurus and Tyrannotitan never met, for Wadiosaurus lived in the Yarapali Formation in India during the Middle Triassic. But in the artificial ecosystem of Gondwa, Wadiosaurus are evidently consistently folded by large carnivorous dinosaurs like Sundowner.
The Sundowner. This is nothing more than hunting a bunch of large dino nuggets if they tasted like some sort of weird, pork-like substance, as well as had legs to run away with. And so far, this territory proves itself to have those tasty, bite-sized chunks running around in this new territory. This is a good indicator that the Tyrannotitan is at his ideal home. The abundance of soft food has proven itself worthy of Sundowner's residence. He clearly seems to like the territory for the abundance of food. After his fourth Wadiosaurus, as well as spotting a spooked Bagaceratops, he decides that he has had enough hunting fun for the day, and thus must enjoy his fourth Wadiosaurus for before sleeping time. As with every living thing, Sundowner is thirsty for water, especially after his killing spree of small Dicynodonts. He will have to keep drinking a lot of water if he is to simply survive on this world, as all living things need to. Even us humans, no matter how often we try to substitute for water. For one of the many billions of times night brings forth its beauty upon the landscape. But Sundowner's agenda of what's a beautiful landscape is an abundance of food and water amongst the landscape. But even then, he doesn't really care about a beautiful landscape. All he cares about is food. But that's the beauty of nature. It's not beautiful, nor ugly, it's just itself. After drinking a fair share of water, Sundowner's new agenda is to simply go to bed, with the side quest of simply eating a couple of midnight snacks before hitting the hay, which is the most likely thing to happen. In the real world, Tyrannotitan and Bagaceratops never met. Although both of which were found in the Cretaceous period, Bagaceratops's fossils were found in Mongolia, specifically in the Barun-Goyot Formation, the same formation that featured Kurukula, which you may have remembered witnessing in Prehistoric Planet Season 2, and the Bayan-Mandahu Formation, where Bagaceratops may have also fought Velociraptor. And while both Tyrannotitan and Bagaceratops were in the Cretaceous period, Tyrannotitan lived in the early Cretaceous period in Argentina, while Bagaceratops lived in the late Cretaceous period in Mongolia. And yet, here in Gondwa, anything can hunt anything, especially since this is an ecosystem where different creatures from different time periods and different places are in the same ecosystem, resulting in the fact that Tyrannotitan and Bagaceratops meet. After having a snack before bedtime, Sundowner has an idea of where he could sleep for the night. A massive rock-like structure close to the middle of the dried lake. It seems like the perfect spot for him to sleep. While his brain may not be the biggest of the theropod dinosaurs, he definitely is smart enough to understand the concept and need for a vantage point, which will come in handy for him in his future. And while a Tyrannotitan's eyes are not the most perceptive of any dinosaur, they're definitely perceptive enough for him to map out a potential path to the top of the rock-like structure. While he is in fact in a hurry to find a nice sleeping spot, he's also taking it a bit slow, with the equivalent speed it takes for the editor to figure out all this stuff when making this video. And much like the video editor, Sundowner is in an area where it's completely all new to him. And also much like the video editor, it is definitely going to take some time and getting used to when it comes to a lot of things that are going to happen in the future. But, thankfully, once everything new to Sundowner is no longer new to him, he will have nothing to worry about for a long while. The same thing can be applied to the video editor. Sundowner, now seeing that he is at the top of the rocky structure, he can see almost everything of his territory, from the reason why it's called the Dried Lake to another likely hotspot where plenty of snacks await him for until another great migration. Although Sundowner still has more to explore of his new territory, he simply is in need of sleep because contrary to Jurassic Park's agenda, it is really unknown whether or not dinosaurs were active 24 hours of the day. A more likely case is the fact that dinosaurs will need to sleep eventually, as all living things have to sleep. And in nature, sleeping has no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And even then, all life has to sleep eventually. As the dawn arises, so too does the sun. The dying breath of night is official, but Sundowner still sleeps. But in his defense, he has endured a very long journey to find a new territory, and thus is rather justified to sleep. And even then, it's not time for him to wake up yet. Oh, never mind. Anyway, there is an evident reason that Sundowner has clearly gotten up. It is primarily due to his food drive, but there's a bigger reason why he has gotten up so early, and that is because, despite being an apex predator, something he can sense is stressing him out. The something in question is because those who are working on the artificial ecosystem of Gondwa are introducing more animals to the ecosystem. And Sundowner seems rather stressed about it because of the overwhelming amount of smells he can smell from close to the surface, despite not having the best of smell. The youth of the small animals are getting bolder by the minute, and the animals, specifically the alphas of these animals, are pretty much going with them to protect them. On top of it all, Sundowner still has to explore more of his territory that he has just discovered. He's only discovered practically half of the territory the moment he got there. Before he explores more of his territory, his current agenda is to simply get breakfast and a nice complimentary drink of what is nature's equivalent to coffee. The coffee in question is not coffee like us humans think of it as. That coffee being water. Sundowner has caught what was essentially an hors d'oeuvre for him to enjoy. A nice, tasty Wadiosaurus. These Dicynodonts from Triassic India will make for a decent snack, for now. And yet, Sundowner will get a lot more hungry after drinking his morning dose of water. With long legs adapted for open terrain and a body build meant for aerodynamics and speed, Sundowner should supposedly be able to move fast. But, due to the weight he has, that being 6 to 7 tons, Sundowner is definitely not a very fast walker, but a very quick and formidable runner. This bodily structure that Sundowner has, along with the rest of his species and many other large Carcharodontosaurids, is a necessity when dealing with large prey, especially for when it comes to using hit-and-run tactics to avoid getting stomped into a scavenger's dinner by sauropods. When looking closely at Sundowner's face, one may notice the rather chin-like structure on the Tyrannotitan's lower jaw. This chin-like structure is actually an attachment point for muscles. This attachment point for muscles on the lower jaw allows Tyrannotitans to hit hard, despite having teeth that are built more like steak knives. On the topic of utilizing very powerful chin muscles and very sharp teeth as a means of delivering very brutal blows to one's prey items, Sundowner is ready to go hunting for some tasty treats amongst his new territory. And while looking for some tasty treats, he may as well explore more of what his territory has to offer. Like this tasty Mongolian ceratopsian Bagaceratops, amongst an unexplored part of his new territory. Success has been achieved in this hunt, but there are plenty more hunts he will have to endure if he is to keep sustaining himself for the day. It hasn't even been a single day, and already Sundowner seems rather satisfied with the fact that his territory is abundant in food. So far, the food sources that were provided to him were Dicynodonts from Triassic India and Ceratopsians from Late Cretaceous Mongolia. But he has seen that the new territory has another thing on the menu. Something he has seen last night before going to sleep. If he is to encounter the creature that he saw last night before sleeping, he will have to cross what gives it the name the Dried Lake, also known as Sundowner's new territory that he has obtained last night. Upon crossing the Dried Lake, he notices that he's not the first to have conquered this territory, as many other animals have came here and eventually died of old age, or even may have died in a conflict with the previous owner. Sundowner is rather uncertain of the reason these bones are here. The thing he can be certain about, however, is the possibility of a potential meal coming by, given how often animals pass through the Dried Lake. However, he currently has his eyes on a rather belligerent prize. In the real world, Tyrannotitan and Megalocheles never met in the same location, for Tyrannotitan was in the early Cretaceous period in Argentina, while Megalocheles, the giant tortoise, was found in India and Myanmar and other parts of Southeast Asia throughout the Miocene all the way up to the late Pleistocene. But here on Gondwa, Megalocheles, much like school bullies regardless of age, tend to think they can get away with attacking anything without facing any consequences. Thankfully for Sundowner, unlike school bullies, there is no weird justice system protecting these tortoises from becoming a tasty snack. And quite frankly, the aggression of these tortoises is making them rather borderline suicidal, because they are not used to fighting giant apex predators from the Mesozoic era. The only saving grace that the Megalocheles have is their high egg rate, and even then, not many of them are going to make it to adulthood in the future. Upon being spotted by the rather testy tortoise, Sundowner lets out an aggression display, telling it to back off. Unfortunately for Sundowner, the tortoise is not backing down or buying the display. Thankfully, it doesn't really matter, especially since these tortoises don't seem to hit Sundowner that hard. And while it definitely hurts Sundowner's teeth, he definitely is getting a lot of food from these aggressive tortoises. Although Sundowner has simply fought and killed 2 Megalocheles, his nose can pick up that there are more than just 2. Sundowner has clearly hit the jackpot in terms of food. In fact, he might have encountered this territory's equivalent to a pantry, which is something that he is definitely going to rely on for until bigger game comes by. Sundowner is more likely to enjoy this while this lasts, but he can't help but sense the dramatic change in the ecosystem as the alphas are soon to arrive. But the plus side for him, this could possibly mean lots of food to supply him for until bigger game comes by. But until that happens, he will have to indulge in eating a lot of Megalocheles for as much as he can. When exploring more of his newfound territory, Sundowner can't help but notice the presence of Pulmonoscorpius. These scorpion-type arthropods from the Carboniferous period realistically should not be alive due to the fact that there's not enough oxygen for them to support themselves. But evidently, here on Gondwa, there's definitely enough oxygen for Carboniferous animals and every other animal here on this artificial ecosystem to survive. Thankfully for both sides, the Pulmonoscorpius are as interested in attacking Sundowner as Sundowner is in eating them, that being not really interested. Unlike this Megalocheles who is clearly into attacking whatever exists, But Sundowner is too full to fight, or even bother killing and eating another Megalocheles, and thus flees up the hill. In his desperation to escape a very aggressive tortoise, the Tyrannotitan realizes that he is in a very dangerous situation after climbing up a very steep hill. He'll have to carefully find a way down, because one wrong step, and his rule will end before it even begins. Thanks to Sundowner's rather Archosaurian brain, which is suspected to be capable of figuring out a problem and a solution to said problem, Sundowner has successfully, and very awkwardly, made it downhill without a scratch. Whilst the descent wasn't very elegant, it definitely helped Sundowner make it to see tomorrow. The other reason why Sundowner was able to make it down without a scratch is because this is absolutely not Jurassic Park or any of those Jurassic movies where the dinosaur is just me hungry, me go nom 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 on whatever I see. It is not Jurassic Fight Club where they're fighting like they're going for blood for the blood god or whatever it is. And it definitely is not one of those cringy CGI sci-fi movies from the Sci-Fi Channel that basically have the dinosaurs written up as essentially psychotic movie monsters. But at the same time, it is not Disney where everyone just bonds together and sings Kumbaya or does any of that goofy, ooh-woo, cringy stuff. And by any and all means, do not get me started on when there was an AI dinosaur animation, because that is absolutely disgusting and abhorrent. I am terribly sorry for the rant that I did. It is primarily because I have seen way too many dinosaurian inaccuracies all over the internet, aside from a few good paleo artists. And this, to an extent. Now let's see what I missed. Let's see, he got thirsty after all the hunting. All that tension from trying to not die made him thirsty. He gets water. Spots. Oh, okay. Now I'm up to speed of where I missed. With no other choice for a filling and meaty option, Sundowner has to be hunting down and eating Megalocheles. Unfortunately for both parties, it's a lose-lose situation. Megalocheles' hard shell is not what Sundowner's teeth are built for dealing with. But at the same time, a Megalocheles cannot withstand the sheer force of a Tyrannotitan's very powerful jaws. While they're not as strong as T-Rex's jaws, they're definitely strong enough to puncture through the thick hides of giant dinosaurs. The neutral party that intervenes with two warring factions that are living and dying tends to intervene, and that neutral party is nature. For Sundowner is entering foggy weather upon his newly acclaimed territory. This is a rather neutral occurrence, with both benefits and detriments. Benefit for Sundowner is that prey items are not able to see him. But at the same time, the detriment for Sundowner in this weather is that it's kind of hard for him to find any prey items. All the young Tyrannotitan and the residents within his new territory can do is simply hunker down, wait, and endure until the fog passes. Thankfully for Sundowner, he does not have to worry much about things obstructed by the fog, aside from a potential rival for territory. And even more thankfully, it's not what his nose is picking up. What his nose picks up is usually food, but what it also has picked up every time he went for a drink is possibly a rival or competitor for food. He can simply get that by just sniffing around the area, as many animals can do. And while Sundowner's nose is not as great as the more famous Tyrannosaurus Rex, it definitely gets the job done when helping him figure out what kind of animals he might be encountering when it comes to different territories. And it's very safe to assume that he's not the only predator to frequent this lake. Whilst it is a rather concerning kind of situation, Sundowner is not really that worried. The factors as to why Sundowner is not that worried, despite knowing that he's not the only predator to frequent the lake that he drinks from, is mostly because he is an apex predator. He does not have much to worry about, aside from another apex predator. And even then, the other predators that frequent the lake are not really other apex predators aside from one semi-aquatic individual. However, he is rather more worried about the other parts of life, such as the case when it comes to adulting no matter the species. Like adulting in humanity of modern day, adulting in a Tyrannotitan like Sundowner is very, very stressful. However, unlike adulting in humanity of modern day, Sundowner doesn't have to worry about taxes. However, Sundowner has to worry about getting food to sustain himself for a day. With the new kingdom being established, Sundowner is still on the verge of becoming a king to the dried lake. However, he has yet to do the most necessary thing many animals have to do when establishing territory, and that is to mark said territory. Before he commits to signing the lease that is marking his territory, Sundowner simply does look around his entire territory. He may have been banished from his family pack, but in hindsight, it was definitely necessary in order for him to become fully independent. He will likely be even more independent throughout the rest of his 50 years of lifespan that Carcharodontosaurids of the apex level are known to have. This was nothing more than the start of marking his territory. First comes the battle cry, and the second comes the broadcast. From the top of the roost that he will sleep in for a lot of his life, a broadcast from his roost is bound to travel throughout the entire dried lake, letting all who are nearby know that they are dealing with an apex predator, a potential king to the dried lake. In the real world, it is rather unknown what Tyrannotitan may have sounded like. It's even unknown if dinosaurs like Tyrannotitan have marked their territory that way. But what you see here is simply a speculation based off the real world, for in the real world, wolves will mark their territory by howling. It wouldn't be that surprising if dinosaurs, be it Tyrannotitan or some other species, did the same thing. What Sundowner knows for certain is that it is time for the king to sleep. What Sundowner does not know, however, is that he has set off a chain reaction by conquering his new home. Until then, though, take care, live an amazing life, and forget not your humanity. This is the Cheese Touch, signing off.